Hello and welcome to Jessie James Beads. My name is Jem and I'm here to help you with wire. For our short video today, I want to share with you a technique which works on the Perfecting the Wrapped Loop video, which we recently looked at together. What we're going to create is a double wrapped loop connector, sometimes known as rosary linking. You can make great big long swathes of chain with this technique. And the best part is that you can dive into your bead soup box, which I have just here, and create wonderful pieces of jewellery with very random Jessie James beads, bits and bobs. Let's head down to the board and look what we're going to create together. So this is an example of a double wrapped loop bead connector. When you start putting it together into a chain, it becomes a rosary linked chain. You can call it whatever you want to though. It's a really fantastic way of using up individual beads that are left over from mixes and strands. It's also a great way to use up short lengths of wire from your scrap pot. So this is 18 gauge round wire. I'm working in raw copper because for one thing it's soft and for another thing it shows up nicely on the camera. So I've got my selection of Jessie James beads. I've got a big old pot of random leftovers, and I'm just going to link a couple of them together. First of all, I'm going to show you how to make a double wrapped loop connector. So we're going to pop our bead onto the wire, make sure it fits our lovely 18 gauge. Plenty of wire either side. There's a good 2 inches either side, maybe 1.5 inches. You probably won't need much more than 1 inch on either side, to be perfectly honest, but I'd rather always have a little extra than too little. So I'm going to put some straight, these are tapered chain nose pliers. I'm going to put a little right angle at one end, and we're going to repeat what we learnt last time with the wrapped loop. So you can take the bead off if it makes your life easier. Always put the bead on so you can get a sense of where the centre of your piece of wire is. What we're going to do now is to create a wrapped loop at one end, exactly the same as we did in the last video. I'm just rotating those pliers around to get the first half of my loop shape. Remove the pliers, have a look, see if I'm happy with the shape and form, and then draw that tail back over the angled section that we created together. So what I'm going to do is create a double wrapped loop connector to begin with, and then I'm going to show you how you can integrate them all together into a great big long chain. So I'm going to support that round form exactly the same way as we did with our last video. I'm going to wrap a couple of times around that core wire, exactly the same as for the Perfecting the Wrapped Loop. I'm going to leave the little tail for now because I want to have the same number of wraps on both sides of the bead. So I'm going to slide my bead into position. I'm going to estimate the place at which I want the next angle to occur to be the same distance between the angle of the wrapped loop and the bead, and then you've got the gap between the bead and the angle of the wrapped loop. So trying to keep those the same would be super. So I'm just going to put the pliers underneath, estimate that distance and create my right angle bend. So that's looking reasonably the same distance wise, and we're going to repeat exactly the same thing on the other side. So rotate those pliers around to get the first half of that shape, like so. So you've got almost a shepherd's crook shape there to begin with, and then you can draw the tail of wire all the way around until you get that second loop shape. So I'm going to support that round form. I'm not squishing down anywhere the wires cross over. What is ideal is to have that centralised on the core wire. So you might be able to see this is slightly over to the right. The easiest way to fix that is to pop your round nose pliers in and just rotate them gently until that loop sits centrally on the top of the core wire. I'm then going to support that loop shape, just draw the wire down a little bit, give that a tiny squish and a squeeze just to give it a little bit of extra residual strength. Hold on to that round form with one set of pliers, and I'm going to show you a 2 plier technique now, which may make your life easier. So what I would then do, I'm just going to move my partly finished chain over to the top. I'm going to support the loop on one side. Again, I'm not pressing down on where the wires cross over. I'm going to draw the wire around and use a second pair of pliers to pull that into position. Now the reason I leave the sticky outy bit of wire here is so that I can endeavour to get the same number of visible wraps on the link or the connector, however you want to know it. And you can do that by just making small movements on either side until such time as you are happy with the size that you have. Now I'm working here with a resin bead of some description, so I can be reasonably squishy with my pliers, pushing the coils of wire against them. If you're working with a beautiful glass or crystal bead, you would want to take a little bit more care not to put any pressure against that bead. So I'm going to take another little bit on both sides, just to ensure that it looks the same from either end. That looks pretty good. So the next thing I'm going to do is use the flush side of my flush cutters. If you support the wire as you cut it, it tends to not ping quite so far. There seems to be a lot of energy in these small pieces of wire. So when you are cutting the wire from your Jessie James Beads bead connector, do just hold on to that excess piece, and then it won't fly away and be found by your toe late one night. So what we're going to do now is tidy down the sticky uppy parts exactly as we did with the perfecting the wrapped loop. And again, you can use 2 sets of pliers for this if you like. So I'm going to push the wire down, and I'm just moving the pliers around gently in the cut direction of the wire. So on this end, we'll need to just orient it just so. If I tilt that over, I'm going to pop the pliers over the top and then just rotate them around ever so gently, a very small amount. You can straighten up that core wire, and you have now got a double wrapped loop connector. As a bonus for today's Jessie James Beads mini video, I'm going to show you now how to connect these together. So step 1 is exactly the same as we have just done. So I'm going to speed run that slightly. Let's grab some extra wire. So again, it's relatively close to being a scrap length. It's about 3 inches, 18 gauge round raw copper wire. As we mentioned in one of our first videos here at Jessie James Beads, if you warm your wire before you use it, it will be so much kinder to you. So let's find a random bead from my fabulous stash of JJB goodies. Here's another beauty. What a pretty one that is. And a dog hair, sorry. So again, I will slide the bead on for 2 reasons. 1, have I got enough wire either side? Yes, I have plenty. 2, does it fit smoothly on the core wire and it's not going to be stressed out? It's spinning freely, so it looks pretty good. So what I'm going to do is just show you how you can start making this chain a lot quicker when you get more comfortable with the technique. You can estimate where those bends need to be. I've done them in opposite directions because it just enables me to see the gaps, and I think that's going to look pretty good. I'm now going to grab those round nose pliers again, create the first half of the loop, create the second half of the loop, like so. And on the second side, rotate the pliers around to step 1, pop the pliers back in again, rotate the tail of the wire around, and you can just centralise that up if you need to. So at this juncture, you can add a little bit of strength to the loop shapes. Again, not squishing where the wires cross over, just the circular form itself. And I'm going to show you now how you can connect all of your double-ended, double-wrapped connectors together. So I've got one connector which is completed and one which is halfway done. So what we're going to do is find a piece of chain, pop the end of that wire through. Let's just put that one out of vision for a moment. And you can see now that I've just snuggled the connector into that loop of chain down at the bottom. So I'm going to grip hold of the circular form. Now, if you're working with a much lighter wire, please be careful that you don't squish anywhere wires cross over. Having fine tipped chain nose pliers is an absolute deal on these. It's a must. So I'm going to draw the wire around just 1.5 times to begin with, like so. And then I'm going to join the other half of my chain to this section. So you might need to just push the connector into the open loop, like so. And then we're going to again support the circular form, but we're not crushing down on that so hard that we're causing any damage to the wire, any weakening. I'm just going to straighten that up slightly. and then push the tail all the way around to wrap around the core that sits where the centre of the bead drill aperture is. So that's gone for 2 wraps on that side, so flip it over to the other side. And exactly the same as I showed you without the other beads, you're just going to make small manoeuvres on either end until you get a similar number of wraps visible on both sides of your connector. So you can take a little bit longer than I am now to tidy those coils up to make them neat and tidy and nice and smooth before snipping away the excess. Again, I'm just going to hold the excess wire like so that it doesn't ping into the great infinity. And then trim away the other side like so. And very quickly you can make yourself a chain of double wrapped loop connectors, sometimes known as rosary linking. So I'm just finishing off in exactly the same way I showed you on the first demonstration by snuggling down the tails of the wire against the core wire so it's nice and neat and tidy.